very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be watching in the world, and welcome to EWTN's live coverage of Day 3 of World Youth Day 2023, coming to you live from the beautiful, sunny Portuguese capital of Lisbon. We have been having such a ball over the last few days, covering all the events so far of the 37th World Youth Day, including the arrival of the Holy Father yesterday, Pope Francis, who touched down at Lisbon's International Airport, just next to us here in Eduardo Park, where the EWTN studios are based. He had a packed schedule yesterday and another busy schedule today. I'm joined by my co-host. We have Father Mark, Mary Christina, and Dr. Matthew Bunsen. Good morning to you both. How are you feeling on this beautiful sunny morning in Lisbon?
Well, top of the morning, Peter. The weather's in the morning is just beautiful. It's cool and fresh, and I think the ocean keeps it nice and fresh. So.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful experience to be here, and there's so much more to happen over the next few days, and you can see the enthusiasm of the pilgrims as you're walking through the streets.
Last night, I can tell you, even at 10 p.m., the pilgrims were just flooding the streets all over Lisbon, chanting and singing with their flags. They had some outdoor concerts as well. But I was talking with my parents who were over visiting too, and they're saying the amazing thing is you don't see one bit of trouble. There's not one bit of, bad rowdiness, just a lovely atmosphere in the air. Now, of course, they're probably still in bed and waking up. That's why it's nice and peaceful this morning.
I have to note that you said they were chanting and singing and having a great time at 10 p.m. They were also having a very good time at 12:30 a.m.
Yeah, before Matthew was trying to get some shut-eye. So yesterday we saw the Holy Father arrive early in the morning around 10 a.m. He touched down beside us here. He went on to meet the President and Prime Minister and the civil authorities. Matthew, what happened then last night when our kind of broadcast finished? I know the Pope had a private encounter that was very special.
He did. Well, in his address to the leaders of the church here in Portugal, he referenced the clergy sexual abuse crisis, and he talked about a process of purification, of reconciliation. After that meeting, he had a private meeting with 13 survivors of abuse.
Okay.
The details are not in great abundance, as is expected, because this is a very private and apparently very intense session with them. But it's part of the gestures that Pope Francis has been making and will continue to make, I think, here in Portugal and elsewhere as the church grapples with the sexual abuse crisis, in particular while he's here.
Father Mark, what do you imagine it must be like in those very sensitive and I'm sure very emotional meetings between Pope Francis and, in last night's case, 13 survivors? The Pope is very good at just listening to their stories, what's on their heart. What must it be like? Obviously, we don't know because it's behind closed doors.
Right. I think, you just see him in crowds, or when he meets individuals like you see in crowds, that he has a great capacity just to embrace the moment, the emotion, just to be there with the person and to get at that level. I've always been struck by his spontaneity and ability to, to console the person, to connect with them on a very human level. So I think he excels there.
Yeah, in his comments to the bishops and others last night, he said that the victims who must always be heard. And I think this is an important listening session. Apparently it lasted for about an hour. It took place at the Apostolic Nunciature, the Vatican Embassy here in Portugal, which is usually where these types of sessions are held.
And we saw even with the papal trip recently to Canada, listening to the indigenous as well. I remember being on that, covering it for EWTN News, and the Pope just sitting quietly, listening intently. Yeah. And that's powerful.
Yeah, I was talking to a priest friend recently, and he was giving a conference to priests. It was right after a release of names that happened in that particular diocese. And one of the priests stood up and asked him and said the situation, what are we supposed to do? I just feel like all my years of trying to build connection and evangelization in my parish is just lost, overnight. And this priest, he told the priest, we have joy still, that there's a Christian joy that's not dependent on circumstances. I mean, we suffer and we have difficulties, whatever, but we have this life of Christ in it. So you still have joy. We need time to be humble and silent, to listen and to be present to that. And that we have the truth. We have the confidence of giving the saving truth of Jesus Christ, that in whatever situation, he is the path of healing, of reconciliation, of renewal.
And it's when we talk about suffering as well, I know Pope Francis last night prayed in particular for a very sad case of a pilgrim Matthew, who passed away here at World Youth
Well,
Day.
that's right. We were informed this morning that the Holy Father said Mass at the Nunciature, where he's staying, for a 62-year-old pilgrim from Toulon, France, who was here for World Youth Day, who had an accident and unfortunately passed. Her family was flown here to be with her, and I believe that the Bishop of Toulon was also at her side. So it's a sad event for anyone happening here. Let's keep her in our prayers.
And when you look at the incredible and the mystery of the tapestry of life and suffering mixed in with the hope and the joy and the ecstasy of life, there was, I know he won't mind us mentioning, but our colleague from EWTN Nordic, Peter Weigel, who is instrumental in running EWTN in the Scandinavian region, just a few days ago had a terrible tragedy when his 29-year-old daughter passed away. She was out walking at night with her friends, struck by a car. I think they survived and she didn't make it. She was killed instantly.
Right.
So I know our thoughts are with our colleague Peter Weigel and all of his family. But it's, and especially she wasn't going to World Youth Day, but at a time when the emphasis is on the youth in the church, her family so involved in EWTN and bringing the mission to all of the Scandinavian countries, and this tragedy to hit them. How do you, for people watching now who have had similar experiences in their life, Father, how do you grapple with something like that?
I think, to get closer to family and friends, draw close to them, and to bring it to the Lord. He can fill and be present there in our suffering. He's sometimes he doesn't take the suffering away, but he, as Kierkegaard said, he fills it with his presence. He's present to us in a new way. So as the answer to everything, is to turn to the Lord in deeper prayer and follow him.
This morning, the Holy Father will be meeting with university students. He's heading to the Catholic University of Portugal.
That's right.
The main professor will give an address, and then the Holy Father is going to hear a few testimonies, is it, Matthew, from different students?
A variety of students. So the Catholic University of Portugal is considered one of the finest institutions of higher education in all of Portugal. Among its alums is somebody that we talked quite a bit about yesterday, and that's the president of the country, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, as well as a very prominent cardinal, Jose Tolentino de Mondoncia, who holds a very prominent position in the Vatican. So this is a university that is well established. It was founded in 1967, but as I was saying, it's well known for the quality of its education. A number of students, including some from the psychology with majors there, economics, even dentistry, are going to be giving their testimonies to the Holy Father, as you mentioned too, after a greeting from the rector of the university.
And these testimonies, they will be kind of the state of the world, according to these students, what's on their heart. Is that it?
Yeah, I think the expectation is that this is what are the issues that they're facing right now, what they're concerned about for the future, and what their aspirations are. This is part of this whole discussion that we're hearing. What do you want for the future, and what is on your heart?
Now, Matthew, your resume and achievements and accolades could stretch from here back to the States and back again. One of them is, of course, a university professor as well. Getting through to the young people in this day and age when we talk about truth.
That's right.
Getting more difficult?
It is, from a couple of different directions. There is the cultural crisis that we've talked about quite a bit over the last couple of days, where students coming from a variety of different backgrounds are facing so many challenges because of the pressures of social media, even the pressure of some of their peers to turn away from the truth, to abandon faith. But then we also have a great crisis even in Catholic education of what it is to be a Catholic university. That idea of identity. Are we actually faithful to the teachings of the Church? Are the teachings of the Church informing everything that we're doing? And so there's a priority, I think, for education today, in particular Catholic education, to be faithful to our identity, to what we're called to be. And John Paul II wrote so extensively about the truth in Catholic identity and education. And from that standpoint, those are the sort of touchstones that we all have to be very mindful of, these milestones as we're trying to educate. Young people, though, are innately looking for the truth, and they want that guidance from their parents and from their teachers. And our responsibility as educators, then, is to give them that truth.
And particularly as well, when we look at the vernacular in the U.S. even, what is truth? We have your truth, that in phrase that has been coined over the past just couple of years.
Out of the mouth of Pilate, right?
Yeah. But it's, I'm speaking my truth. And it's kind of intellectual bullying in a way, isn't it? Because if we're having a debate or an argument about something and I profess that, well, this is my truth is definite and you can't argue with it. So it's shutting down the argument. It's saying, this is my truth. And if you try and challenge it, you'll trigger me. And then we have trigger spaces, and I mean, it's hard to keep up with, isn't it?
And that's usually followed by a Twitter mob that cancels you.
And I think that's a claim to an objective truth, is that my truth is right, or, we all have a right to our own truth, is a claim to objective truth in itself. But I think that's a crisis of truth. At the same time, though, it's like everybody has their sights set on young people, right? Because they are engines of change, revolution. I mean, we all want a better world, right? So you have to tap in to young people. And all the popes have done this, right? But Pope Francis especially seems like very much, has a heart for them, to want them to bring them into the Christian message, the Christian revolution, so to speak.
Well, just as we are speaking here, I am looking at the monitor, as you're seeing at home on the left of your screen. These are live images coming to us from the Catholic University of Portugal, just outside where they are waiting for the arrival of the Pope. We see the choir getting ready, the welcoming ceremony about to take place when the Pope arrives, and he will go in then for that meeting with the young students. So, as you can see, beautiful sunny morning here in Lisbon. Just an incredible city, as we've been saying over the past few days, with centuries of history, one of the oldest cities in all of Europe, with a great Christian tradition as well going right back. So this would be such a special moment for these university students, and as well, this would be seen by other university students, and hopefully it will help them find the truth.
Yeah, and I think like their openness to new ways of doing things, and like I said, everybody has a sense the world needs to get better, right? We're headed in bad direction. So they're naturally idealistic, I think, in a healthy sense. They want to latch on to something that's hopeful. They have a freedom. I come back to that a lot. It's like, for them to jump on the plane and come to World Youth Day is no big deal,
And we see, Father, sorry to interrupt you, just as we're speaking, I see Pope Francis has arrived. There is the Holy Father meeting with some of the officials, presumably from the university, welcoming him, arriving in his wheelchair, as we saw yesterday, disembarking from the plane using a lift because of his mobility at 86 years of age. And
one of the themes that Pope Francis often hits on, especially when he's talking to young people, is encouraging them to dream, to tap into that idealism that they have as young people, but to also then have expectations for the truth and have expectations that they will receive the kind of care, the pastoral care, that those who are older than they are obligated to give them, and that means guidance.
And I must correct myself, because I presumed, being from Ireland, we do everything indoors. You couldn't do anything outdoors. So it looks like the whole event will be taking place outdoors, outside the university, which is lovely to see. And you can hear the crowds cheering in the background. We're going to wait and see, by the way, folks, if we are going to get an English translation. We presume we are, but we're yet to hear if we will have a direct live translation in English.
I suspect, too, that Pope Francis will deviate from his text quite a bit, especially when he gets excited and is fascinated in talking with young people.
Fantastic. And our producer Greg is telling me, yes, indeed, we have the English translation. So for the moment, we will cross over now live to the Catholic University of Portugal.
And now the rector's welcome. Holy Father, welcome. On this campus of the Portuguese Catholic University, students, professors, collaborators, alumni, and friends of our university and of other Portuguese and international universities are gathered, who welcome you as pilgrims with an open heart. The Portuguese Catholic University was founded 56 years ago, originating from the Faculty of Philosophy of the Society of Jesus in Praga. Today it has 17 faculties and 4 campuses in Lisbon, Porto, Braga, and Viseu, with about 20,000 students. And in 1996, it established what is now the University of San Jose in Macau, China. We're a university on the move, with many international professors, about 2,000 professors,
prémios a mais de 20% dos nossos alunos. Orgulhamo-nos, em particular,
Scholarships and prizes are awarded to more than 20% of our students. We especially care about working with young people in situations of social and economic fragility, migrants and refugees, supported under the Pope Francis Fund. By definition, the university is a space for research, dialogue, and welcome. In the face of realities marked by exclusion and inequality in an age of uncertainty, the university stands as a guardian of hope, which means promoting the ability to dream, a help in order to discern, to listen to the voices that surround us, listening to the times in order to intervene, defending the dignity of women and men, believing in their transformative capacity. The search for knowledge to improve the human condition is combined with an ethical discernment that guides the possibility of making choices and taking action, fostering beauty and the aesthetic posture, which is also a search for meaning in the world. In addition to the laboratories and classrooms, the university also organizes activities around 2 art galleries. The university exercises the nurture of knowledge, the philosophy of action, and the management of beauty. Holy Father, in the encyclical Laudato Si, you invite us to think of a single world with a common project and to welcome the world as a sacrament of communion. This should be the experience and practice of an academic. Indeed, science and research require mutual recognition and the ability to transform and transcend in community and collaborative involvement. Our proposal is rich in values because it springs from the humanistic Christian vision of existence. But to honor this tradition, we must ceaselessly challenge ourselves. The university does not exist to preserve itself as an institution, but to respond courageously to the challenges of the present and the future. Therefore, it will always be a work in progress, never completed. The construction of the new Campus Veritate of the Portuguese Catholic University, whose foundation stone Your Holiness will bless, will increase the welcoming space of our campus, open to the world, to listening and to hope. And in this significant moment, we also want to announce the birth of a new chair
Manuel Rosa, e oferecemos conhecimento, anunciando a nova cátedra Economia de Francisco.
And the new chair is called Economics of Francis and Clare, dedicated to welcoming transversal initiatives to all the faculties and to promote the principles of the economy of Francesco and to develop a social plan or social model that puts people and the environment first. Pope Francis, may God reward you for the generosity with which you inspire us in our mission. We pray for you. Thank you for your concern for the protagonists of the future, the young people who are gathering in Lisbon these days and from whom we will now hear some of their voices. Our Holy Father standing and now greeting the rector of the Portuguese Catholic University, Isabel Capeloa Gil.
Santo Padre.
And here we are now hearing some testimonies. This is from Tomás Virtuoso. Holy Father, in my academic career, the Portuguese Catholic University has been a place of transversality of knowledge, in which everything is perceived as connected and interdependent, of renewed amazement in front of the beauty of created reality, whether in a mathematical equation or in a text of St. Augustine, and of a profound encounter with God, who sustains everything and gives meaning to everything. Much of what you propose, Your Holiness, in the encyclical Laudato Si, I was able to experience during these happy years as a student at the desks in the classroom or in the library, in the extraordinary experience of the country mission, and in the Economy of Francesco project, and finally, in the many friendships I have made here, which remind me that my life acquires purpose and greatness when it is lived with others and in service.
Que não ignora as muitas intuições que a Laudato Si nos lança.
It seems to me that my generation is being asked to not ignore the many insights that Laudato Si offers. In the first place, when it encourages us to increasingly apply the best science has to offer, to place our trust in the divine gift of reason, to continue to find effective solutions to the challenge that present themselves. Secondly, when it asks us to reject technological progress that does not have strong ethical and spiritual roots, that does not ensure respect for the inviolable dignity of the person and of all creation. Thirdly, when it leads us to the firm decision to live according to the demands of the common good, a foundational principle of the Church's social doctrine. Furthermore, when on the one hand it stimulates us to a conversion of life, and it encourages us to a more committed political and social participation, which focuses on the preferential option for the poor. Finally, when it encourages young Catholics of my generation to evangelize, to fearlessly affirm that an authentic integral ecology is not possible without God, that there can be no future in a world without God. Holy Father, in the Fourth International Congress on the Care of Creation, with which the Catholic University hosted earlier this week, through the initiative of the John Paul II Foundation for Youth, we committed ourselves precisely to integral ecology, in a certainty that Christ, the living and true God, is the answer to a world that seeks meaning among the joys and pains of the present time. I have the joy of being able to deliver into your Holiness's hands the manifesto resulting from our work on lifestyles for a new humanity. Thank you, Holy Father, for inviting us to be true worshippers of God, and in this way to live wisely, to think deeply, and to love generously. Thank you. This is Tomas Virtuoso. He's 29 years old. He was born in Lisbon, and he has a degree, or is working on a degree in economics at the School of Business and Economics. And he is also in his second year studying theology in the Faculty of Theology.
Santo Padre, reconheço hoje
This is Mariana Cravero.
converes com os princípios por os quais Vossa Santidade
Holy Father, today I joyfully recognize that my journey in this university converges on the principles towards which Your Holiness has summoned the academic world through the proposal of a global educational pact, and this is what I would like to focus on. I started studying at the Catholic University in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. In this context, the university, through the Catholic Solidarity Program, helped me understand the urgency of seeing the human person as a priority. And so I was able to lend a hand every week to serve meals to the homeless and needy in the heart of the city of Porto. However, this experience was only a starting point. It's the way God taught me that this welcoming service to the most vulnerable and excluded had to be a daily priority as a student, as a member of an outgoing church.
do impacto real da esperança e da alegria dadas e recebidas. A Universidade Católica pôs-me também em contacto com a metodologia aprendizagem-serviço.
In recent years, I've collaborated with an institution that supports people with disabilities, and I've been able to see the impact of the hope and joy given and received. The Catholic University also put me in touch with the internship service methodology, which gave me a more inclusive understanding of academic themes and greater certainty about the civic responsibility that education brings with it. In this context, I volunteered in a prison psychiatric clinic. I dived into this project with head, hands, heart, and soul, and we managed to achieve high goals, making, for example, 28 prisoners with mental health problems recognize their potential and experience the freedom of talents, the title I gave this project. I recognize that I have never lacked the contribution of the educational community, with the conditions and tools necessary to be able to grow fully as a young person and as a woman. Therefore, I commit myself to being a link of reconciliation and peace in the service of the community, as Your Holiness never ceases to remind us or recommend to us. And I'm sure that God invites me to dream of my journey among the most excluded. As a future psychologist, my duty is to welcome everyone without discrimination and to accept others just as they are, regardless of the conditions in which they live or their past. Holy Father, I want to be a protagonist of change and not a young woman at the window watching the world go by. Professionally applying what I have learned to touch the most vulnerable and to help write new stories and paradigms for a more just and believing world. Our generation wants to be happy. I realize with joy that I am surrounded by young protagonists, enterprising, and ready to make noise with that enthusiasm, commitment, and hope that transform the world. We young Christians have a great desire to infect others and show them that it is worth taking a risk with God. Holy Father, I know that God is young, and I see him every day in each of us. Thanks a million. Mariana Cravero, born in Porto, she's 21 years old. She holds a degree in psychology from the Faculty of Education and Psychology. From 2023 onward, she will be a student of the Master's degree in Psychology of Justice and Deviant Behavior. And she's given a gift of a cross to our Holy Father and receives in return the gift of a rosary. Now we should be hearing a choral presentation. So not only hearing testimonies, we've heard a beautiful duet. Now we hear a testimony from Beatriz Ataid. Holy Father, good morning. I thank you for so many invitations to go deeper and carry out a mission together. Thank you for making us take new paths, provoking us to reflect, listening to us, empowering us, encouraging us, and placing trust in us, young people of the economy of Francesco. My philosophical studies are at the culmination of a long process of discernment. Little by little, I realized that whatever vocational form my life might take, my desire to mature always has led me to take care of others. Specifically, I felt called by God to help lift hearts wounded by sin. So after my late conversion, I had various experiences that led me to conclude that it is from the field of culture that I feel called, that God will bless me in the field of culture. That's where I will discover myself and discover Him, and I will be able to take action. Like yeast in the dough, like salt of the earth, it is in the culture of the village, in the culture of the people, in the culture of the earth, with its songs that I want to find myself on the alert, and with the church in favor of a good and healthy culture. A huge confirmation of this is realizing that even before my conversion to the God of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit was guiding me in this direction as a baptized person. And since that time, I have also remained very interested in the question of what it means to live and be a person, and also in the meaning of suffering. So philosophy emerged as the way by which God was enabling me to take on more care for my brothers and sisters, and for myself, for whom Jesus Christ suffers so much. I discovered the great dynamism that emanates from the study of philosophy to give prevalence to the virtues, but also to create bonds of friendship in the common search for the truth, which is Christ, and to fight against cultural uprooting. In the Portuguese language, we have an expression that we use when we want to help someone, chamar a razão, to make them think. What I want is that reason remain at the service of communion. So as a cultural agent in the broadest sense, I will find joy in bringing the art of contemplation among people. I want to help think and live life based on the principles of charity, peace, and truth. As St. Ignatius advises us, the commitment to the little, the small, and the possible is helpful. At this moment, I am committed to completing the philosophy course. The habit of prayer is essential for this, to grow day after day in trust in providence and in openness to the Holy Spirit. Many thanks. This is Beatriz Ataide, and she was born in Lisbon. She's 27 years old, and she is a member of the Economy of Francesco Hub in Portugal, and she attends the campus in Braga. We have one more testimony here, a testimony of Mahur Kafashian. I am a student of dentistry in Viseu since September 2022, initially displaced from my country, Iran. I took refuge in Ukraine, where a real war made me feel like a survivor. But above all, I am a believer, and I owe my hope regarding the future to the extraordinary team of the Catholic University. They have taken care of me and continue to do so within the context of the Pope Francis Social Support Fund. I was not the same person I am now. If they had told me last year that I was a very strong person, I probably wouldn't have believed it, but now I do. After everything I've been through, after the constant feeling of being without a home, family, friends, after being left without a home, without a university, without money. I know that the concept of strength doesn't mean that I don't feel tired, exhausted, and broken down by grief and loss. It just means that I have the strength, faith, and courage to carry on. I feel proud to be here for a new beginning in this beautiful and welcoming country, actively participating in the life of our common home and studying, while I too try to sow love, hope, and faith around me to those who unconditionally offer me a culture of encounter in this university. There are no words to describe my feelings right now, but I am blessed to be able to be here, proudly speaking to you about the past, about my past, believing that better days will come. Thank you. As we heard, this is Mahur Kafashian, a native of Iran, 25 years old. She's a student of dentistry in the Faculty of Dentistry located in the Visio campus. So we've heard testimonies from all of the campuses. We should be hearing from our Holy Father now, the address that he has prepared for the university students, the Catholic University of Portugal, founded in 1967, the same year that Pope Paul VI visited Portugal. And we hear the crowds. Many of these students most likely also participating in World Youth Day. Our Holy Father will be participating in the welcome ceremony this evening. Dear brothers and sisters, good day, he says in Portuguese. Thank you, Madam Rector, for your kind words. You said that all of us feel like pilgrims, and that's a beautiful word, one well worth reflecting on.
Literalmente significa dejar de lado la rutina cotidiana y ponernos en camino con un propósito, moviéndonos.
To be a pilgrim literally means to put aside our daily routine and to choose to set out on a different path, moving away from our comfort zone towards a new horizon of meaning. The notion of pilgrimage nicely describes our human condition, for like pilgrims, we find ourselves facing great questions that have no simple or immediate answers, but challenge us to continue the journey, to rise above ourselves, to press beyond the here and now. It's a process which every university student is familiar with. A pilgrim moves toward a goal. There's always the danger of walking in a labyrinth where there's no goal, and you'll never find your way out. We are rightly wary of quick and easy answers. That's the labyrinth. Easy solutions that neatly resolve every issue without leaving room for deeper questions.
Desconfiemos de esas propuestas que parece que lo dan todo sin pedir nada. Desconfiemos. La desconfianza es un arma para poder caminar adelante y no seguir dando vueltas.
Distrust never allows us to take up challenges. One of Jesus' parables uses the example of a pearl of great price, which is sought and found only by the wise and resourceful, by those ready to give their all and who risk everything. They have dissatisfied. Or resting content with easy answers that anesthetize us to painful and disturbing questions. We can find this in any... there's always ways that we'll find out how to behave well. But these easy answers always drug us. Friends, I would like to encourage you then to keep seeking and to be ready to take risks. At this moment in time, our world faces enormous challenges, and we hear a painful plea of so many of our brothers and sisters. We're living a third world war piecemeal. We're not experiencing the agony of death, but we're experiencing a process of giving birth. Not at the end, we're not at the end, but we're at the beginning of a great new chapter of history, so we need to have courage. So we need to work on a new choreography, one that respects the dance of life by putting the human person at the center. And so your rector's words impressed me, especially when she said that the university does not exist to preserve itself as an institution, but in order to respond courageously to the challenges of the present and the future. Self-preservation is always a temptation. It's a knee-jerk reaction to fears that distort our view of reality. If seeds were to protect themselves, they would completely destroy their generative power and condemn all of us to starvation. If winter were to persist or never end, we would not marvel at the spring. So, replace your doubts with dreams. Don't remain hostage to your fears. Set about working to realize your goals. A university would be useless if it were simply to train the next generation to perpetuate the present global system of elitism and inequality in which higher education is the privilege of a happy few. Unless knowledge is embraced as a responsibility, it bears little fruit. It will be sterile. If someone who has benefited from a higher education, which nowadays in Portugal, as in the wider world, remains a privilege, makes no effort to give something in return, that person has not fully appreciated the value of the gift received. So I'm thinking in the book of Genesis, the first questions God asks are, where are you and where is your brother? It would be good for us to ask ourselves, where am I? Am I trapped in my own bubble? Or am I ready to take the risk of leaving my security behind and becoming a faithful Christian, working to shape a world of justice and beauty? Or again, where is my brother or sister? Experiences of fraternal service such as Mishao Pais and many others that arise within academic communities, which ought to be considered essential for those attending university. An academic degree should not be seen merely as a license to pursue personal well-being, but as a mandate to work for a more just and inclusive and very truly progressive society. I'm told that one of your great poets, Sofia de Mello Breiner Andresen, was asked in an interview, which served as a kind of testament, what would you like to see Portugal achieve in this new century? She responded without hesitation, I would like to see the attainment of social justice, the reduction of the gap between rich and poor. Allow me to put this same question to you, dear students, pilgrims of knowledge. What do you want Portugal to achieve? What do you want the world to achieve? What changes? What transformations? And how can universities, especially the Catholic University, contribute to this?
Beatriz, Maor, Mariana, Tomás, les agradezco sus testimonios.
I thank you for your testimonies.
Tenían todo un tono de esperanza.
They all struck a hopeful note. They were full of enthusiasm and realism. You did not complain or escape into flights of idealism. You want to be protagonists of change, as Mariana told us. As I listened to you, I thought of a phrase from the writer José de Almada Negreiros, which may be familiar to you. I dreamt of a country where everyone was able to become a teacher. This old man, now speaking to you because I'm old, also dreams that yours will also become a generation of teachers. Teachers of humanity, teachers of compassion, teachers of new opportunities for our planet and its inhabitants, teachers of hope. Teachers that defend any life that is threatened right now, especially through the ecological crisis. As some of you pointed out, we must recognize the dramatic and urgent need to care for our common home. Yet, this cannot be done without a real change of heart and of the anthropological approaches undergirding economic and political life. We cannot be satisfied with mere palliative measures or timid and ambiguous compromises, for halfway measures simply delay the inevitable disaster.
Los términos medios son solo una pequeña demora en el derrumbe. Se trata más bien de
Rather, it is a matter of confronting head-on what sadly continues to be postponed. The need to redefine what we mean by progress and development. In the name of progress, we have often regressed. Yours can be the generation that takes up this great challenge. You have made the most advanced scientific and technological tools, but please, avoid falling into the trap of myopic and partial approaches. Keep in mind that we need an integral ecology, attentive to the sufferings both of the planet and the poor. We need to align the tragedy of desertification with that of refugees, the issue of increased migration with that of a declining birth rate, and to see the material dimension of life within the greater purview of the spiritual. Instead of polarized approaches or creating polarization, we need a unified vision. Thank you, Thomas, for reminding us that an authentic integral ecology is not possible without God, that there can be no future in a world without God. In response, I would say, make your faith credible through your choices. For unless faith gives rise to convincing lifestyles, it will not be a leaven in the world. And it won't be enough for us Christians to be convincing. No, it's not enough for us Christians to be convinced. We must also be convincing. Our actions are called to reflect, to be joyful and radical, and witness the beauty of the gospel. Furthermore, Christianity cannot be lived as a fortress surrounded by high walls, a Christianity that raises the ramparts against the world. That is why I was moved by Beatrice's testimony when she said that it is precisely within the field of culture that she feels called to live the Beatitudes. In every age, one of the most important tasks for Christians is to recover the meaning of incarnation. Without the incarnation, Christianity becomes ideology. This is a temptation, ideological Christianity. It's a Christianity, a quote-unquote Christianity. It is incarnation that enables us to be amazed by the beauty of Christ revealed through every brother and sister, every man and woman. In this regard, it is significant that you have named your new academic chair dedicated to the economy of Francesco, also after St. Clare. The contribution of women is indeed essential, and in a collective consciousness, we've often thought of women as second class, as something supplementary, and that not giving them the role of protagonists. This is what's been happening in the collective unconsciousness. The contribution of women is essential. In the Bible, we see how the economy of the family is entrusted largely to women. They are the real heads of the household, possessed of a wisdom aimed not merely at profit, but also toward care, coexistence, and the physical and spiritual well-being of everyone, including the poor and the stranger. It's enthusiastic to approach the study of economics from this standpoint. For the sake of restoring to the economy its proper dignity, lest it fall prey to unbridled market speculation. The Global Compact on Education, with its 7 overarching principles, encompasses many of these issues, from caring for our common home to the full participation of women and the need for innovative ways for understanding economics, politics, growth, and progress. I encourage you all to study the Global Compact and to become passionate about it. One of the points it addresses is the need to educate about welcome or acceptance and inclusion. We can't pretend that we've never heard the words of Jesus in the 25th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. So I was moved as I listened to Mahur's testimony when she described what it's like to live constantly feeling the absence of hearth and home and friends, of being without a home, a university, or money, tired, worn, and beaten down by grief and loss. She told us that she rediscovered hope because she met someone who believed in the transforming power of the culture of encounter. Every time someone offers a gesture of hospitality, it prompts a transformation. Dear friends, I'm very happy to see that you are a lively academic community, open to the current reality, in which the gospel is not a mere decoration, but an inspiration for your individual and collective efforts. I know that your lives are busy between study, friends, community service, civil and political responsibilities, care for our common home, artistic activities, and so forth. That is what it means to be a Catholic university. Each part is related to the whole, while the whole is to be found in each of its parts. As you acquire knowledge and academic expertise, you will mature as a person in self-knowledge and in the ability to discern the path of your future. Going on a journey, yes, but in a labyrinth, no. So carry on. A medieval tradition has it that when pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago met one another, they would greet each other by exclaiming, Ultreia, and the other would respond, Et Suseia. These expressions encourage us to persevere in seeking and in the risk of the journey, telling us to move on and aim higher. Go, take heart, keep going. That, dear friends, is likewise my heartfelt wish and prayer for all of you. The crowd now reacting to...
You're watching EWTN, our live coverage of World Youth Day 2023. The images you're watching now coming from the Catholic University of Portugal, where the Holy Father has just listened to the testimony of a number of students talking about their hopes, their dreams for the future, the challenges that they face, their desires. And then the Holy Father responding with his message to them and to people in education, not just here in Lisbon and in Portugal, but all over the world.
The Republic taking part in this event.
Con toda a igreja, oremos como o Senhor nos ensinou. Pai nosso, que estais nos céus, santificado seja vosso nome. Venha o nosso vosso reino. Seja feita a vossa vontade, assim como no céu. O pão nosso de cada dia nos dai hoje. Perdonai-nos as nossas ofensas, assim como nós perdonamos a quem nos tem. E não nos deixeis tentação, mas livra-nos do mal.
And now we'll be receiving the apostolic blessing.
Bendito seja o nome do Senhor. O nosso auxílio vem do Senhor. Abençoe-vos, Deus Todo-Poderoso, Pai, Filho e Espírito Santo. Amém.
And those here present now, about 2,000 present, with about 6,500 in another hall, being able to see what's going on with screens, now applauding, all on their feet. At the end of our Holy Father's visit here to the Catholic University of Portugal. Our Holy Father taking part in
Pope Francis smiling as he looks on to the 2,000, as you heard there, who have gathered in front of the Catholic University of Portugal to hear the testimony from those students and to hear the Pope's response. Lovely images there of the Holy Father waving to the crowd who are waving back there and smiling. A beautiful sunny morning here in Lisbon. And we thank you for joining us wherever you may be watching in the world. It's coming up to 10 a.m. local time here in Lisbon on the edge of Europe. Beautiful to hear those testimonies from the students, wasn't it? I'm joined by Father Mark, Mary Christina and Dr. Matthew Bunsen here in the studio at Eduardo Park, not too far from where the Pope is at the moment. I was particularly struck by Mariana, who is 21 years young, and she said, I want to be a protagonist of change, not a young person at the window watching the world go by. It was just a lovely phrase.
Right.
What struck you, Matthew?
Well, to pick up on your point about what was being said here, a young woman, I think it was Beatrice, talked about the fact that I had discovered the great dynamism that emanates from the study of philosophy. But she then talks, and that we were discussing this before the Holy Father arrived, and that is, but also to create bonds of friendship in the common search for the truth, which is Christ, and to combat cultural uprooting. So a young woman, I think, who has a very clear sense of not only who she is, but who she's also called to be. And for these students to be able to express that so clearly tells us, A, something about them, but also, B, a little bit about the quality of the education that they've received, because clearly there's a good grounding here in Catholic identity.
Yeah, Beatrice, who you mentioned, she's 27 and a student of philosophy. She also said we need to create a good and healthy culture. But again, to what we were speaking about beforehand, if people just joined us and missed our pre-conversation about truth and what is truth, and how in the United States now in particular, this expression of your truth, my truth, and she called for the joy in bringing the art of contemplation among people. So to dig deeper and to actually go beyond superficial arguments.
Yeah, I thought that was a great point. That, yeah, she brought up prayer. You know, it's essential for this is to possess the good habit of prayer. And that's absolutely necessary if we want to know the truth in a deeper way, to fall in love with Christ, if we want the direction, the guidance to do the right thing, to be protagonists, you have to be praying. That's like the first essential point of the apostolate of the laity. So I'm glad she mentioned that.
Yeah, and the testimony of Thomas, 29 years old, born in Lisbon, pursuing a degree in economics, I believe. His discussions, too, about the importance of sound and strong ethical and spiritual roots, he says, for technological progress. So we live in an age of such shattering change, of such immense and swift progress, that one of the great concerns that we have, and this is part of an education process, too, is including with it a reflection on what is the right thing to do. What is the ethical thing to do? What really does promote human flourishing and the common good? And I think Thomas really was expressing that. So there's clarity in scientific progress, but it's rooted in wisdom, and that wisdom comes really from the wisdom of the Church.
And maybe Mariano was touching upon that, about talking this uprooting, this cultural uprooting, that technology, you know, you get this kind of belief that whatever is new is the best, right? And that technology needs to serve a healthy culture, right? It needs to be
serve the common good.
Yeah, the common good. So.
Yeah, and Thomas, he also made the point that when it encourages, and it being progress, young Catholics of my generation to evangelize, to fearlessly affirm that an authentic, integral ecology is not possible without God, that there cannot be a future in the world without God.
And I think there were such great examples to young people who are watching on live television, because these images that you're watching now in EWTN being broadcast all over the world, but here in Portugal, on the main Portuguese television channels, this has been broadcast front and center. So a lot of young people are watching this as well here. And great examples, Mariana, who again is only 21, and she was talking about all the charity work that she does. And she said that she was helping during the pandemic, when people were being told to stay at home and, you know, look after yourself and make sure you're safe. She went out and was helping the homeless on the streets. Then she talked about going into prisons and helping prisoners who were psychiatrically ill. And she said that she dived into this with her head, hands, heart and soul, which I thought was a lovely way to put it. But then she also talked about, which I thought was beautiful, when she worked with people with disabilities as well, the impact of the hope and joy that she was able to give, but then that she received in return.
Right.
Which, of course, when I speak to people who do charity work, it's kind of a cliche, but it's true that they always say, I get so much more than I give.
And I think that's really captures the feminine genius. You know, Pope Francis mentioned wanting women to be protagonists, not just a supplement, but that attention to the person, you know, the service of the individual. You know, that was highlighted in her talk.
And again, can you imagine just for a second that example of a 21-year-old, just, you know, a few years from being a teenager, going into a prison with psychiatrically ill prisoners? Like, what a formation for that person, and great courage to do that.
Yeah.
Confidence in her faith, confidence in herself, but also to this desire, this longing to do good. Mariana made that great point too, where she said, and this is, I think, crucial to understanding the whole process of education too, and that is our generation, she says, wants to be happy.
Yes.
I realize with joy that I find myself surrounded by young protagonists, enterprising and ready to make noise with that enthusiasm, commitment, and hope that transforms the world. So they're searching for happiness. They're searching for fulfillment. The problem that we have now in so many aspects of culture is that those things that are being offered that will make you happy won't. That the truth will make you happy. And that's where, again, this obligation of educators is so crucial, and formators.
Yeah, a lot of short-term happiness in the world on offer today, but if you want that true, long-lasting, everlasting happiness, you have to get the truth.
And I think that kind of connects to what Thomas said too. He's 29 years old. He has a degree in economics.
The only boy representing.
Yeah. And he talked about this integral ecology, as Matthew said. You know, it's not possible without God. And again, as Christians, you know, I think that's what the Catholicism can bring to the environmental movement, is the idea, the notion that this creation comes from God, and that we are charged with being stewards of creation. He creates a garden, we're to till and keep the garden, but also that this creation is for man. Mm-hmm. That if human dignity is being pulverized by whatever policies of elevating nature above man or something, you know, we have to correct that. And there are certain fundamental tenets of social doctrine that does that. That we do have a right to private property. That subsidiarity is to be a principle of finding solutions. Those closest to the problem come up with solutions.
In his very brief comments, Thomas hit on several of the key themes of Catholic socialism. He even uses the phrase Catholic social doctrine. Yes. Solidarity, the common good, the dignity of the human person. So this is a grounding in this that has to inform what we do in our decisions, in our prudential judgments about how we're going to save the environment and how we're going to have technological progress that is actually progress that is meaningful and good for the common good.
And that mankind per se is not the enemy, right?
So, but if we're placing man at the center, we always go back to John Paul II and his very first encyclical that became a blueprint for his pontificate, Redemptor Hominis, where he says, for man, he is a mystery to himself unless he understands himself in Christ.
Right.
And I like that Thomas as well, first up, 4 young people speaking, 3 of them female, 1 male, and he was the one who mentioned the encyclical as well. And, you know, all of them were from Lisbon, bar one, who was Mahur. She's 25, a dental student, and she's originally from Iran. She fled Iran and, you know, the terrible things that are happening there with the morality police and so on. She went to Ukraine to seek refuge before the war broke out. The war broke out, and so she talked about living in that constant fear of, will my family be okay? Will my friends be okay? Will I have a home? Things that, you know, most of us, and you watching as well, we never, thankfully, have to worry about these things. It's hard for us to comprehend what that life must be like. So going from Ukraine then to Lisbon here. But she spoke beautifully as well. She said, I don't feel like a survivor, I feel like a believer, which I thought was a beautiful way she put it as well.
Yeah, and Pope Francis very famously is focused intently throughout his pontificate on immigration, on migrants, on refugees. This young woman is a perfect example of who he's talking about.
Yes.
It distills for us, it makes very clear in a real person, her story. Imagine what she has seen just in the last few years of escaping Iran to go to Ukraine, to be a permanent refugee, and then multiply that by the hundreds of millions who are on the move around the world. And that is the reality that Pope Francis, I think, is wanting us all to be aware of. That's why he always talks about the peripheries, what's happening beyond here.
And yesterday he spoke about the borders with Portugal and borders around Europe in his opening talk, and he said they shouldn't be borders of stopping people, but borders of connection. He said to connect,
Right.
Which is part of his...
Yeah, and in his address, he talked about hospitality and how, you know, important that is. I looked at it, to me, it reminded me just of kindness. I mean, Mother Teresa, you know, talked about the importance of bringing a smile to the poor in which you serve, and that welcoming hospitality is an act of kindness that's a great evangelizer, but, you know, loving the person in themselves, you know, we're called to do that. So.
And something we can all learn from again. Mahur, she was the last to speak in 25, and for someone who's had such an incredible story in her young life so far, she spoke for the least amount of time, and but just powerful what she did say. And she said, "I do not feel tired, exhausted, or beaten down by grief and loss. It only means that I have the strength, faith, and courage to go on." So when you look at someone like her and what she's been through, it gives us hope too. We were speaking earlier about that tragedy of the pilgrim who passed away at World Youth Day. I mean, it's what we all need, isn't it? Just courage and hope to just keep on keeping on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the word idealism popped up a couple of times, but there's also a great realism about these young people. They recognize the challenges that the world is facing right now, the crises that the world is facing. Pope Francis referenced that. But Pope Francis, tapping into some of their comments, made the note that we should not be alarmed and if we sense an inner thirst, a restless, unfulfilled longing for meaning and a future, we should not be lethargic but alive.
Isn't that interesting? Because going back to universities, we mentioned this because we were listening to university students here in American colleges, and you know, sometimes what happens in America sets the tone for the rest of the world, and it influences so much.
Yes.
But you have the safe spaces and trigger warnings, and of course we want people to feel comfortable, protected. We don't want people getting upset for the sake of it. But the Pope making the point to young people, you know what? It's okay. You will feel upset sometimes. You will feel hurt.
Right.
That is life, and you have to embrace that and work through it.
You know, I like what Beatrice said in that search for truth, piggybacks on what you said. But she said, but also to create bonds of friendship in the common search for truth, which is Christ, and to combat cultural uprooting. But I thought that's so true because young people, especially in college, you hang out a lot with your friends, spend a lot of time with friends. I know in my own kind of conversion experience, God used very powerfully in my life friends that were devout. One was a Protestant, another one was a Catholic. But to this day, I still remember things they told me, sharing their own journey. So there is something intrinsic to that. In our search for truth, it's perfected, I think, with these bonds of friendship and communion.
And the Pope said to be dissatisfied is to be human.
Yes.
Yeah.
That, you know, there may be this feeling in you that I have to look more, I'm still not satisfied. I keep having to seek and to...
Because we have, our home is in heaven. We have this isn't the final home. We have a promised land we're headed for. So
we are pilgrims here.
Pilgrims, yeah.
But to your point, Colin, and it's an important one, I think. The young lady from Iran, Mahur, when she's giving her testimony, we know now what she has endured. Contrast that with, and I'm not trying to pick on many young people in the United States and elsewhere, but their sensitivity, their feelings are hurt. I think her experience tells you there is suffering, and there is the mystery of suffering in life. How we deal with it, you cannot avoid it. It will come to you. And go ahead.
I think in the West, I mean, the suffering is like, for young people, what I continually see is just a sexual revolution.
Right.
You know, like women just suffer, you know, at every step forward with the sexual revolution. You know, lack of marriage culture declining, you know, single parent motherhood. Promiscuity really tears up a woman's heart and body. So that's a suffering of the West, you know,
right.
I think.
You know, and Francis is always reminding us about the immensity of suffering and challenges around the world in places we're not aware of. And this young woman, as I was saying, embodies so much of that. But in the West, I think, especially through the universities and elsewhere, they're very insular. Pope Francis, in his speech today, talked about these bubbles that we create to get out there, to broaden your horizons.
And I like, we were talking about the world where everything has to fit in a tweet and an easy solution. The Pope said he would ask people to rightly be wary of quick and easy answers and quick solutions that neatly resolve everything. They don't exist. These neat,
That's right.
quick solutions. We wish they did.
That's right.
But
not
don't.
Everything in life can be reduced to a tweet or an Instagram post.
Yes, as much as we would like
As
to.
much as-
Wouldn't that be so easy? But you know what I loved as well? The Pope said at the end, and I'm paraphrasing him now because our sheets are blowing everywhere in the beautiful breeze here in Lisbon. But at the end he said, you are students here listening to your professors and your teachers, but I want you to go out and be professors and teachers in the world.
Yes.
But he didn't say in the academic sense. He said teachers of wisdom, teachers of charity, teachers of good.
Yeah.
You will be teachers in the future, which I thought was beautiful.
And I've seen that theme in Pope Francis from the very beginning as like, he's not like inviting us to go into the world. He's like kicking us out the door to go into the world. I mean, he really brought a real energy and a dynamism to evangelization. I think giving it a big boost.
But he's aware, too, and he says it here, this old man.
Yeah, I was going to say
now
that.
speaking to you.
We were listening to the translation, said, did he? And we checked it on the script, and yes, he said, this old man speaking to you.
Speaking to you also dreams that yours will become a generation of teachers, as you said, teachers of humanity, teachers of compassion, teachers of new opportunities for our planet and its inhabitants, teachers of hope. Hope is one of the things that in so many ways is missing in our culture today. If you don't believe that there's anything beyond, if there's anything eternal, anything transcendent,
It's dissatisfying.
it is dissatisfying. It is unfulfilling, and it will ultimately destroy your hope.
Well, sorry, Father, yes.
Yeah, Pope Benedict said as long as God exists, there's hope. And so if we've lost the vision of God, we lose our hope. And I think what the Pope, I think he's always tapping in with the young people is their willingness to change, to try new things and methods. And I think of Mother Angelica. I mean, she's a cloistered nun, and she had this openness to answer this call with EWTN to do something crazy, like with 12 nuns, to start on this new path. I mean, I think that is part and parcel of Christianity. Not that we have to all do extraordinary things, but God does ask us to come out of ourselves, to make an act of forgiveness, to do works of charity, to help to help some other person. So I think that's what he's tapping into.
Well, Pope Francis also, at the very end of his speech, tapped into the Camino de Santiago, the way of the pilgrim. Not too far from here. It ends at Santiago de Compostela. And he used the two great medieval quotes of Ultrea and Susea. Ultrea is to move on, keep going, and you shout that to your fellow pilgrims as you're making your way along the Camino. Ultrea, keep going, a little farther, a little farther. But then there's also Susea, which is keep going up, aim higher. And in the medieval phrasing, you also ended that with Deus adiuva nos, God help us, so that God is also with us on this pilgrimage.
And when you mentioned Mother Angelica and having the faith and courage to step into the unknown and follow the call from God, I remember seeing a great clip online of Mother Angelica saying that when she, felt from God that she had to take on this mission of starting the television network, and she said, "But, our Lord, I know nothing about television." And he said, "I know, now begin."
I can use you then.
Yes. And now look at where we are today with EWTN, with the help of the viewers at home, broadcasting not just in English, but as we speak now, simultaneously underneath us, there's a studio just like this with our team broadcasting live in Spanish, across the park in other studios in Polish and in German, bringing this and sending it by satellite, by radio, by internet, all over the world.
I think there's like 80 employees here.
There's like 80 people here, technical, the crew. What you can't see behind the cameras is we've the easy job. All the crew here working hard between lights and makeup and camera and the guys in the booth, Michael and Greg and Massey and Alessandra and everyone.
And just one more word on that, because we do have to repent and be converted every day. That's a continual process. The Exodus event of the Old Testament, Moses going to the promised land, he uses that that imagery a lot. You have to leave your land to go to this new land, new freedom. So that exodus is fundamental to Christianity. Again, not having to do the extraordinary necessarily, but to come out of ourselves, to think about the other person. We saw in the women, going out to help the individual, whatever marginalized situation they're in, that we're all called to do that.
It's wonderful. Well, if you've been watching or just joined us, you are watching Day 3 of World Youth Day here, our live coverage on EWTN. We were watching the Pope meet young university students at the Catholic University of Portugal this morning. And you know what? I loved just the simple line when the four spoke, the last one, as we said, the person who came from Iran to Ukraine and then here to Portugal. And she said at the end, there are no words to describe how I feel right now. And that must be what it feels like for these students to be talking to and to be listened to by the Holy Father. We're going to take a quick break in a moment. Matthew, where are we going next with the Holy Father?
Well, the Holy Father's going to the town of Cascais, where he's going to have an encounter with the Scholas Ocurrentes, which is an international organization that he established for education for young people, especially disadvantaged ones, using sport, art, and academics to bring students from all over the world together.
And it is a beautiful little seaside town just on the edge of Lisbon with the fishing boats bobbing in the water, lovely and peaceful with the sea lapping up. We were there recently recording for EWTN News in Depth. So you won't want to miss it. That's coming up in around 15 minutes time here, continuous coverage on EWTN. But for now, we take a break. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned and we'll see you very soon live from Lisbon.